finally address one of my big problems. I am a hoarder, specifically hoarding books. All of these books I have had in my collection by my bookshelves, on the floor as decor, and I have not read them. I do not think I will ever read them, and it's time to find them a new home. The reason for all of this, I think, is just in general some good spring cleaning. I need it. I have not cleared out my shelves since I started reading books and became a very avid reader, started receiving books and ARCs and all of these wonderful things. I do feel really fortunate and grateful to have received them, but I have collected quite a few that I genuinely will not be reading, and I have found the perfect new home for them. So over the weekend, I went to my public library. I don't know if every public library has this, but right next to it was this little store, and basically the money just goes right back to the library. All of these different kinds of books from different genres. Price point, I think it was like $1 or up to $6 for the general fiction. Non-fiction, they always host a lot of sales as well. The only ones that cost a bit more money were the vintage classics. I did get a beautiful one in my last vlog. That one was like $20. Even then, such a good price. However, when I was looking at the shelves, I was browsing through the fiction section to see if I would find anything for me. What I noticed was the last names of the authors, trying to see like what I could find. It jumped from A to D and then E to L super quickly because they just did not have enough inventory on their shelves. That made me so sad, and then I just kept thinking, one, I'm running out of space. I have this little like TBR cart that I was using for something else and I had to use for my books because I was running out of room. And just realizing when I got home from the library that day that there are so many books that I've been fortunate enough to receive that are just collecting dust, and instead of doing that, they can find new homes. So I'm going to be dropping all of these books off at my public library. So I wanted to go ahead and go through these 3 book stacks that I ended up building. Now let's talk about the criteria for all of these books. Number 1, if I've read the book before, I know I'm not going to want to reread it. 2, books that I liked when I purchased it, but my reading taste has changed and I now no longer am interested. 3, books that I have received from publishers unsolicited. 4, multiple copies of the same book. I have a couple in here. And then 5, going back to things that I received from publishers. When I first started creating content online specifically for my books, I noticed that anytime I would receive an email from a publisher, I was so excited that they had reached out. I would say yes. And I think I was overly enthusiastic and eager at that time, thinking that maybe it's not my genre right now, but it could be. And I could read it in the future. I could love it in the future. So I'm going to say yes to this email, receive the book, and then I would put it on my shelf, and that was the end of that because I would not read it. And that ended up happening a lot. I haven't even counted them. Let me see how many I actually have. I have 50 books that I will be unhauling for today's video. That is actually quite a lot. It's more so than I thought. The first one is Knife River by Justine Champion. Oh wait, it still has the letter too. Some type of mystery, literary suspense. They say it's haunting and exquisitely written, but it's also sexy, infused with dry wit and moving. And they're comparing it to Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. So you know I have to be careful. I could convince myself back and be like, no, maybe I will read this. No, I've made the list. This is going. Then we have The Switch by Lily Sampson. I remember this one sounded really interesting too, actually. 2 couples, one twisted game of love and obsession, dark domestic thriller, and the dangerous secrets that come to light when a wild fantasy turns sinister. These are the kind of books that I think I prefer more as audiobooks. I love listening to them on my walks, and they just sound really engaging. And I think it's because a few years ago I loved listening to podcasts, specifically Crime Junkie. So I think whenever I listen to an audiobook for a thriller, it reminds me of listening to a podcast. This can still be on my interest list for audiobooks, I just don't need the physical. This one is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I received a little note. And actually this one I received for a thriller package, I believe. This was either a summer PR package or a Halloween PR package. And they're recommending the audiobook, actually. So there is this one. Idle Burning. I received Idle Burning as like one of the first books that I got when I started reading again. And it's a really short book. I have a lot of mutuals that have read it and that have liked it. This is translated fiction, and I think it talks about the obsession before a pop star, someone in the media space. I have heard a lot of good things about it. I thought I would be interested in reading it. I've just never gravitated towards it, so I think if anything, again, I would just do an audiobook. Then we have The Busy Body by Kemper Donovan. I did read this once. I did enjoy it. The publisher reached out to me saying be interested in making a video for it, so I did, and I liked it. But mystery is not a genre that I gravitate towards. It's not a genre that I gravitate towards often, and so I think it was like a one and done. I read it, I liked it, don't see myself rereading it, so I'm going to go ahead and gift it. This is another translated fiction. This is called The Only Daughter. These translated fictions were given to me when I had agreed to be put on this list, but I initially thought that the list meant if they have something upcoming, they would reach out and see if I was interested, which is a method I prefer with publishers to avoid receiving books that I know I won't read. But that's not how the list ended up working out. So anytime there was a new translated fiction release, it would automatically get mailed over to me, which I think is where a lot of these are coming from because I continue to see the same publisher. Then we have The Woman Who Climbed Trees. The book spine is beautiful. Okay, yeah, these were definitely all sent around the same time. So I am just going to give the title, insert a picture of it so you guys can look into them if you're interested. The next one we have The American Daughters. Then we have Where the Dead Wait. Next we have The Breakaway. Then we have Camp Zero, Great Transition, and lastly Tomb of Sand. I do have Tomb of Sand on my list. This is just a really heavy book. So again, if anything, I would revisit as an audiobook. Then I'm just gonna jump around between these next two. I have Game of Thrones here. I picked this up at a farmer's market. I had a mutual that had just started Fable. Her Fable was reading this. It just so happened that same, I think it was like week or next few days, I went to a farmer's market and I found a copy. So I bought it with the intention of reading for her book club. I immediately became confused with all of the names. They just throw you in and you have different POVs. There was a map. I became overwhelmed and I never picked it back up. I started trying to watch Game of Thrones. I wasn't fully interested. Then I switched over to House of Dragon and I'm obsessed. So definitely do not see myself reading this. I would much rather watch the shows, which is rare for me to say. I typically will lean towards books, but I guess not in this scenario. Then I have The Appeal, One Murder, 15 Suspects. Can you uncover the truth? This author does a lot of murder mysteries. I continue to see her books at the bookstore. Again, it's another murder. I really don't read them. I prefer listening to them as audiobooks. I do remember when I flipped through these pages, they do have a lot of evidence, so it's a very interactive read, which I do like. So if you're interested in that, there's a bunch. This book I did read. This is The Death of Jane Lawrence. I picked this book up when I was going through Barnes & Noble. I love whoever works at a bookstore in general. And you have to make the table for all of the Gothic reads. I appreciate you so much. I love Gothic literature. This is why I ended up buying this. I read it and I thought it was okay. The twist with this one is it's like a marriage of convenience. He's a doctor. She needs some kind of place to stay. I think it was like a society thing. She needed to be married, and so he was like, sure, I'll get married. The only condition is sometimes at night I go somewhere and like you can't know where it is. And she's like, okay, that's fine with me. Anyway, obviously she ends up figuring it out. But this one had something to do with magic. And so I thought that was a really unique twist. I think it just kind of fell flat for me. And we have Then She Was Gone. This was sent in, I believe it was like an end of the year PR package for a publisher. This was one of the books that was like in their best books of the year. I started listening to the audiobook on a walk maybe about like 2 years ago now. I was interested in it in the beginning, but then I lost interest and then I just never cared to pick it back up. I know that this author is really popular, so I feel like this book will find a new home fairly quickly. I think I'm making a bigger stack over here instead of putting them down down here. Then we have The Ruin of All Witches. I picked this book up. I think this is like one of the newest books that I have on this list. I purchased this myself. I was traveling with my siblings. We have a sibling book club. And so what we do is we always go to the bookstore together. Everybody splits off and you pick 1, 2 books that catch your interest. We all meet back together. Then you pitch your book to everyone and see, are you interested in reading it? Are you not? And then we vote on which book everybody is the most interested in reading. And I will say, like, the back of the book sounds really interesting. Issue became when we opened the book and started reading. It felt like I was reading a textbook and I just didn't like that. I no longer wanted to keep reading. My sister didn't want to keep reading, so we gave it up. Then we have Yours for the Taking. This is a book, it's like a sci-fi-esque book talking about climate change and like this white woman and like ultra feminism kind of a girl boss approach to trying to handle and deal with climate change. I read the book, it was interesting, wouldn't reread it, so it's just going. This ended up being a problematic author. As soon as a bookseller told me that it was about vampires and 50% off, I said yeah. Then someone very kindly told me that they saw it in the background of one of my videos and the author's problematic. Morally, we don't align, therefore, I don't want to read it. I don't want it on my shelves. I'm giving it away. Then we have Youth Juice. I actually have 2 copies of Youth Juice. I have a hardcover on my shelves, and then this is the ARC that I received. I unfortunately did not love the book as much as I thought. I'm finding this one a new home. I'll stick with the hardcover. Then we have Mary Jane. Mary Jane is one of the first books that I ever read. I really love this book. It's like a very good introduction into literary fiction. These next 2 books I received from publishers. This one is called Lucky. This was a Reese Book Club pick if you're interested. I don't know much about it, but I do not see myself reading it, so I'm gonna give that one away. And then we have this one called The Turn Glass. I was so confused because you can read the book both ways. Like this way, the writing looks right side up, but if you flip it, the cover's upside down. Read the book both ways. I don't know, it's really odd. It's kind of like a fun piece that you can have to your collection. I'm going to group these next 3 books because these 3 are books that I already have another copy on my shelves. I just received an extra. Whoever you are, honey, I have a Aardvark Book Club edition. Firstborn Girls is a memoir that I do really want to read, but I have the paperback ARC, so I'm going to give the hardcover away. This just released. Really excited to get to this. And then this is a love story. This is also the ARC that I received, and I have the hardcover, so I'm going to keep the hardcover and give this one away. Everything You Ever Wanted. This was a pick from my book club over on Fable. I was so excited to read this. If you like books like Never Let Me Go, I thought this was gonna be right up our alley. It's like questioning the human condition, and they go somewhere in space, and it just sounded like the perfect setup. I remember this also reminded me of The Truman Show when I read about it. Yeah, you hear about life on Nix, and it's a program, you get to be on this other planet, well, you can never come back. I had such high hopes for this. I felt like it had all been done. I read a lot of books like this. Nothing stood out to me. Nothing was like overly significant. It was just an okay read all around. I wouldn't reread it. And then this one, I have The Surrogate. I believe this is like some thriller mystery. Bought it because the author just so happened to be there and just so happened to be doing an event, and so I wanted to support, but then I was like, oh, I don't actually want to read the book. Now this final one, the first one, is one of the books that I received just randomly. I didn't know it was getting sent to me, but it did. And then I reached out to the publisher and I said, hey, sorry, I received this. Do you want me to send it back? And they were like, nope, sorry about that. You can just keep it. I think the cover's really cute. I am a dog person. I love dogs. Puppy Love at Mistletoe Junction. So if you love reading those seasonal Christmassy reads, this is going to be right up your alley. Or if you read them year round, by all means, read it whenever you would like. This book upsets me. I see the cover and it's beautiful, but the book upsets me because this book is called Who Needs Men? Title, incredible, perfect. The cover, beautiful. I absolutely love the cover. And the reason why I don't like the book is totally on me. It's my fault entirely. I was at Capitol Hill Books. It's a used bookstore in Washington, D.C. It is my all-time favorite, or one of my all-time favorite used bookstores. In the beginning it says, in the 25th century, when men are no longer biologically necessary, when women can reproduce as they wish by cloning, then we find out our character is tasked to help wipe out the last few thousand men who have taken refuge in the Highlands of Scotland. And I didn't even realize this small thing until I got home. This is written by a man, and that just made me not want to read it. Then we have Bright Burning Things. This was sent to me. This book talks about Sonia, who was once an actress. Now she is an addict from losing herself completely. Oh, what keeps Tonya from losing herself completely is Tommy, her son. Okay, I was like, I forgot how to read. But soon, Sonia will be forced to make a choice. Give up drinking or lose Tommy forever. It sounds like you might need to check content warnings. This sounds a bit heavier, so just be mindful of that. Then we have this book, which is really interesting. I skimmed through it, but I don't see myself rereading it. It's called A Broken People's Playlist. This is a short story collection, but it's also heavily influenced by music. And on the back it says it's an addictive collection of authentic prose. Story after story made me stop to reflect on the complexities of life, our various loves, be it family, friendship, or romance, and the way we're all connected. The Surrender Theory. This is a poetry collection. This is one of the first books that I had received that was sent to me when I just started making content and posting it online. Diary of a Void is a book that I have multiple of. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is like a staple for people. It feels like this is one of the books that people read when they're getting back into reading. I read it once, don't see myself reading it again, don't necessarily need it on my shelves, so I'm gonna give this one up. I purchased this when I, again, was like getting back into reading. I love stories about connection and tender moments between people and like this buildup of love. This was at a time when I was still building my content, like the people that I engage with online, still figuring out my reading taste. Basically, I'll just say I have found out that in my personal taste, I like more of a book that's like heavy on the literary side with a romance subplot, instead of just a contemporary romance, which is what this is. This is Icebreaker. I did read it, ended up realizing that I do not enjoy these kinds of books. I received this one called Woman of the Year. Don't remember much about it. I think this was sent to me over the summer. And again, this was more of like a thriller kind of a story. So if anything, I would prefer an audiobook. This is a problematic author. I just don't want it on my shelves. These next three were sent to me in a group. I think this was like some summer PR package. So the first one is called Experienced by Kate Young. Then we have this one called Malibu Summer. I would love for my summer to look like this book cover. Kind of is reminding me a bit like the White Lotus. Then we have a Bridget Jones's Diary. I think this cover is hilarious. Don't know much about it. Don't see myself reading it. Then I have Some of My Best Friends and Other White Lies I've Been Told. This is a debut collection, and the author explores the absurdity of living in a world that has grown fluent in the language of social justice that doesn't always follow through. Then I received this one, The Story of a Black Mother's Garden, called Soil. Soil functions at the nexus of nature writing and environmental justice, and to understand that home is wherever soil rests beneath their feet. I love that, and it actually reminds me of this quote talking about how we have these gardens and how like you have to be mindful of the roots, and how the roots is like the different people that you know, and our roots start to blend into one, and how we have these different seeds of information that is planted, and the idea is like always tend to your garden. I thought that was really beautiful. I received two of these called the Shadow Work Journal. So I won't be reading this, but this sounds really good if you're like into personal like self-development, something like that. And then for the last two that I have this one called Vamps. This was one of the first books that was sent to me, and it says it is perfect for the fans of the Atlas 6 and True Blood. I think I said yes to this because it said vamps, and I was like, vampire? Yes. And then the last one is called All We Were Promised, and this is a cover. This was released last year. The paths of three young Black women in pre-Civil War Philadelphia unexpectedly and dangerously collide in this debut novel, inspired by the explosive history of a divided city. So those are all of the books that I will be unhauling. I think after doing all of this, it's a really good reminder for me personally to be more mindful when I'm responding to emails from publishers, to be more mindful when I'm purchasing books for myself. Not only do I always need to have a physical copy of a book for it to just collect dust, but also to use the local resources that we have, donating to any of your public libraries if they have that additional store next to it, or just encouraging to use your library card. A lot of the times I use my library card, but just to connect to like Libby, Hoopla, which is great, but I can still enjoy reading a physical copy of a book by going to my local library and checking a book out. So that's definitely something that I want to work on this year. I'm excited to go ahead and drop all of these books off and fill some of those shelves up. I think that's everything that I had for this video, so thank you so much for watching. You know what I'm realizing now? How many trips am I gonna have to take from my car to the store to drop all of these books off? No, and this whole thing over here is strictly all hardcovers. Great. Okay. Wish me luck.